Okay, you have joined Midjourney's Prompting for Beginners on October 11, 2025. It is a gorgeous sunny mid-morning here in Texas, and I am here to help you learn a little bit about how Midjourney works so you can troubleshoot your prompts. I am going to unmute one of our guides, Abby, here on Discord. And we also have volunteers, Wonderful World of Stuff, and Johnny Bones here who may or may not burst into voice at some point to interact with us. There are only a few students here at the live event, so this is mainly going to be for the recording people until the live event folks show up. So my pretend students, welcome pretend students and one real student. Oh, and Ipsady has joined. Welcome, Ipsady. Let me unmute you as well. Okay, YouTube should be going. Let me check to make sure I'm not lying to you about YouTube. Restream. We are live on X/Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch. Welcome, Mary Smith. You have your microphone if you should want it. Solange, bienvenue. Would you like your microphone? Parlez-vous? Vous êtes parler? Je ne sais pas français. Pas du tout. Je sais. Mr. Shoney. Give Mr. Shoney his microphone just in case. Golmats, welcome. Now, I said there weren't going to be very many Discord students, and then they all showed up.
I'm spamming general. I'm going through every single one, letting them all know. So I've got
Pablito.
22. I've got people going, what's this? What's going on? Like, so I'm just pointing people your way now.
Oh, thank you.
I never thought about doing the general, all of them.
I do it sometimes, but not today.
I've finished all 20, so let's see if it brings somebody in. Woohoo!
Welcome, welcome. All right. Well, we'll get started at 5 after. Oh, c'est vrai. Merci. Je suis heureuse. Le happy? D'accord. Très gentil. Very nice. Welcome, Pink Tiger. Bravoski. We'll get started in just a few minutes. Merci. Brava. Je ne parle pas Italien either. How do you say either in French? Pazotra, not other, I don't know. Snow and Shine, what a great name. Bienvenue, welcome. Hello. Salut. Mushy mushy.
Either is soir.
Soir? Thank
Soir.
you. Soir. Je ne parle pas l'italien soir. Comment dit-on complete nerd?
Mhm.
When I start speaking Spanish and I forget, I just put an O on the end of everything. Italiano.
Yeah, well, that's safe. That's
I know,
safe.
it's great. Yeah.
Welcome, Lurie G4. Let us get started. All right. Welcome, everyone. I'm glad you could make it today, whatever else you had going on. For the next couple of hours, we're going to dive into the basics of prompting. Don't worry, we'll take a quick break in the middle for whatever you need to do. Stretch, existential crisis, grab some water, whatever. Oh, thank you, Himbo. Non plus. I will never remember that, but good. Right, so you're in the right place if you've ever typed something to Midjourney and hit enter and then looked at the result thinking, this is absolutely not what I asked for at all. Does anyone ever show of hands who has typed in a prompt and that is absolutely not what I asked for?
Every day. Every day.
So Solange says thumbs up. Mary Smith raises her hand. Very good, very good. Sadie says, I want to meet the people who haven't. What's that life like? Yeah, exactly. Welcome, Hadar. Goodbye, Hadar. So yeah, I see a lot of hands. Good. This is our space to figure out how to get Midjourney to actually give us what we want. To learn not how to write prompts, but how to troubleshoot the prompts we write to make them more effective. And to do that, we're not going to talk only about writing prompts. We're going to peek under the hood at how Midjourney actually thinks. And so here's how this will go, okay? So I'm actually going to draw what I'm talking about on the screen so you can follow along visually. And then you'll see the prompts in the chat and in Midjourney as I run them, and we'll build from what went wrong to how to troubleshoot it, to how to figure out like why Midjourney does that and what to try next. The whole point of this class is not to teach you how to write a prompt, but to teach you, by and large, at least in a non-technical way, what the heck Midjourney is doing with the words you're giving it so that you can troubleshoot what you're writing. Wonderful World of Stuff is here. And before the class started, we were talking about someone named Evermore, who, if you're out there, Evermore, great praise to the way you somehow think about Midjourney, and you're able to be sort of a prompt whisperer. And I think that comes from understanding what Midjourney is doing with words. So we're gonna take a minute to talk about that. Okay, so one of the things I'm asking is not, if you're here in Midjourney chat, try not to paste images unless invited, because it scrolls the chat, and I'm going to be using the chat to do stuff like this, where I ask you to respond. So welcome. How's your vibe? Can respond with curious and ready, slightly overwhelmed but hanging in there, very overwhelmed but hanging in there. Give me an emoji so I know you're out there and tuned in. It doesn't have to be one of these 3 emojis. It can be any emoji you like. Okay. Very good. Thank you, Himbo. This is how I keep track of who is keeping track of me. Right, because I'm talking into sort of an empty room, so it's great to have the people in the chat and out on YouTube and Twitch and stuff as well. You guys type stuff. I'll see it. So, okay, I'm going to switch over to my iPad where I have started taking notes for October 11, Prompting for Beginners. So let's start by watching how prompts go wrong. Because they will go wrong. And that's sometimes the fun part, I admit. I mean, there are two basic strategies for using Midjourney, right? I'll make two bubbles here. Two basic strategies for using Midjourney. I would say we can give it words with no particular outcome in mind. Just exploring and discovering and pulling the lever on the dopamine casino. You know, I even have a GPT set up for what I'll call the explore and discover strategy. Explore and discover. Here, I'll give you this cool GPT. It actually just creates random words on Anglais in English. Generates these strings of words. Here, let's see if I can show you. That's kind of fun. I'm going to click the random button. You can also give it a word like fox or something that will then give you words related to that word in some way. And then you can just take fun phrases like this one and paste it into Midjourney and see what you get. And this is so much fun. And you can do this all day long. Lithium-ion battery, radiolucent material, lunar regolith. Wow. What? Whoa. That's so cool. And then, of course, you can go into explore and find random styles, which I love. And, you know, try the style with that prompt. How does this work? How does this look? Wow. What the? I was not expecting. I was not expecting. It's very cool. So that is the explore and discover route, right? And the first thing that this teaches us, if Sadie says that GPT is useful for helping build focused prompts too. Oh, that's cool. Because it gives you new ideas, I suppose. Building blocks. Yeah. So what the eclectic list generator helps us remember is that there's no right way to prompt. There are no templates. There's no advice anyone can give you that works all the time. So don't let anyone sell you anything because they will try. I've seen it. And, you know, Midjourney wants you to know that there's a lot of randomization in Midjourney. So be careful if someone tries to sell you stuff. But when you're aiming for a specific image and something's off, now there we can help you because there are systematic ways to troubleshoot that can help. And I'll show you some of those. So that's one approach, right? Is the explore and discover approach. Pull the lever, see what happens, dopamine jackpot. But sometimes we're not in the mood for surprises, right? We actually have a picture in our head and we want Midjourney to actually meet us there. And we call that's the desire for prompt adherence. Wendy was saying earlier that he liked words, the right words for things. So prompt adherence is a great word for that because you're here. I suspect you're here because you have specific visions and you want to learn how to guide Midjourney to realize that specific vision. And, you know, you can say it's explore and discover versus prompt adherence, but I generally don't say versus. I'm more of a fan of saying and. I mean, for me, I do both all the time. Sometimes exploring leads to prompt adherence, and prompt adherence leads to exploring, and it's a forever back and forth for me personally. But let me ask which you guys are. Here's another response. Do you guys feel like you're more explore, discover, or are you primarily concerned with prompt adherence, or are you a both like me? Because knowing which mode you're in, like, sort of play or precision, it changes how you write and evaluate your prompts. If you're exploring, like any prompt will do, right? There's no way to go wrong. But if you're aiming, you're looking for accuracy. So, okay, both. Describing it as flowing both directions is very accurate. Johnny says both. Yep. Welcome, Symbolia. Yeah, we've got a bunch of boths. We've got Code Zero over on YouTube is also a both, says discovery requires experimentation. Mary Smith says most of the time aiming. Yep. I have whole periods where that's where I'm at. And then I kind of sometimes lean into exploring again. Both. Yeah. So knowing which kind is important, like to keep in mind, what am I really doing? Am I exploring or am I trying to do something specific? Because if you're aiming, you're looking for accuracy and you start wanting to get involved with the troubleshooting methods I'm talking about, right? So what kinds of mistakes do we see Midjourney make when we're aiming, when we're trying to do for prompt adherence? What kind of mistakes do we see Midjourney make? I lump them into 3 categories. Let me do 3 categories here. 1, 2, 3. All right. So the first category, I call it missing or dropped details. Dropped details. Like, let's look at an example that, can you guys even read that? I sure can't. Were you like this in school where if your notes were not quite beautiful, you had to like do it again? There. Missing or drop details. Definition. When your prompt specifies a detail and Midjourney just doesn't provide it. That's what we're talking about. Okay. So let's look at an example of that. I'm going to give you the prompt in your chat, and I'm going to put it in Midjourney. The prompt is: a young woman wears a floral scarf, red glasses, a purple vest, engineering boots, and carries an orange leather purse, and she wears her black hair long, braided with pink feathers. Her ankle-length skirt is bordered with stars and moons. She wears a dark purple sash belt that dangles down her hip. You hear all my pauses? Those are all the details we're asking for. She is standing in a library. She's holding out her library card to the old librarian behind the counter. Journalistic photography. So, okay. That's a lot of details. Boy, that's a lot of details. That's 36 details. If you count them, which I did. There are 36 different details. So if you have 36 details, you might think to yourself, well, that's a really long prompt. Of course, you're not going to get all 36 details, right? But I'm about to show you that it's not about the length of the prompt. It has nothing to do with the length of the prompt, and I'll even tell you why. If you hang on, I will even explain why. But you can see that not all of the details we put in the prompt made it into the picture. In none of them is there an old librarian behind the counter. Is that because it's at the end of the prompt? Nope. There is a slight slope of influence that you might have heard of, where the front of the prompt is listened to harder than the end of the prompt. But that slope, which was quite evident in earlier versions of Midjourney, has almost flattened out now. So the place in the prompt almost doesn't matter. What matters more is the way your sentence is phrased. And we'll talk about that if anyone has questions about prompt ordering. We can talk more about that. The second mistake that meanwhile, by the way, if I refer to the screen like I just said, in none of these was there a librarian behind the counter. I ask that my veteran students please scream at me if I am in any way not showing you what I'm supposed to show you. Like, for example, the cam just died. Why would it do that? I don't know. Okay. Thank you for the help, you guys. I know it's live. She's just not there. So second mistake that Midjourney makes. I call it blending. And I also want to add bleeding. Wow, that sounds dramatic. So I say blending and bleeding. The term blending, when the AI mixes characters or objects together so that they don't remain visually distinct. Uncontrolled blending causes one subject's features to merge with another's, producing hybrid or fused forms. Controlled blending can be used intentionally to create like a puppy macaw. This is an example of intentional blending. Oh, well, that was awful. Let's try it again. Let's put it on square. Aspect ratio matters, by the way. Oh, I put it on square and then use the AR here. My bad. This is where it's not blending. There we go. A puppy macaw hybrid. This is blending that we find desirable because that's what we're trying to do. But let's look at an example where we don't find it desirable. So let's make a picnic. With these guys. A bunny, a hedgehog. Gonna hide some of these. A bunny, a hedgehog, a mouse, and a fuzzy monster are having a picnic. So Midjourney's giving it a try. Here's a bunny and a hedgehog and a monster and a I don't know. Here's bunny, monster, hedgehog, monster, bunny, hedgehog, no mouse. Mouse, bunny, monster, 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 hedgehog, fish, maybe. Hard to say. So you've seen this kind of blending before, right? Where it's just impossible to keep everything distinct. And if you look at the prompt, you'll see that that prompt is quite short, and yet it has the blending problem. There's also the problem of bleeding. That's when a property or descriptor in the prompt, like you might use the word golden, like you might say he's wearing golden armor, right? And it spreads beyond its intended subject and it alters the entire composition. Like the modifier infects the global style or tone. Like you say golden armor and it unintentionally creates a golden hour look across the image, like everything turns yellow. This happens a lot if you mention colors. And when you mention a color, the color ends up everywhere, not just where you said. So you say the person's wearing a red shirt and all of a sudden all kinds of things turn red. Right? Have you guys seen this before? Call that bleeding. And now I'm going to give you, Ipsady says, yep. Now, because Wendy asked for it, so we can all blame him, I'm going to give you the AI industry terms for blending and bleeding. So I call it blending. AI calls it entanglement. So if you ever wondered what the AI term for this is, it's entanglement for blending. And if you ever wondered what bleeding was, it's leakage. So if you like entanglement and leakage better, you can use those words. And it is going to make a lot more sense. I'm saying these words because I want you to remember these words later when we talk about the bees. And that whole idea of the bees isn't going to make any sense to you until later. But I'm drawing a little bee here so we remember. Okay. He has a lot of legs, you guys. So entanglement and leakage is going to make a lot better. It makes sense when we talk about bees later. I do not have the term ready for lighting inconsistencies. What a boring thing to waste the word entanglement on, AI nerds. Yeah. Well, in flow matching dynamics, entanglement occurs when latent trajectories of distinct subjects become coupled or collapsed into a shared subspace, causing subjects to lose independence. And this results in overlapping or fused representations during sampling. That's pure AI speak for blending. Anyway, then the third thing that Midjourney does, we're going to call incoherence. Incoherence. Incoherence is when, I didn't paste in a bleeding definition, sorry. In case you're copying and pasting or whatever you want to do. There's the definition of bleeding. Here's the definition of incoherence. Incoherence is when Midjourney's output stops making visual sense. So figures, objects, scenes, they lose internal consistency. The thing we see this most often is with the human figure. It has too many or too few fingers, too many arms, too many legs, right? It's an incoherent, it's a discoherent figure. It's not following the right rules. Show of hands who've seen that. How many hands are you going to hold up? Every time I hold up a hand, my AI webcam believes that it's a signal. I can also tell it, I think I could tell it to zoom. Can I tell it to zoom? Yeah, see that? Well, unzoom. Okay, my AI cam sucks. There we go. Okay. One hand, 6 fingers. That's right. So let's look at an example of that, which means I have to remember to switch back to Midjourney. Again, this is a very short prompt, you guys. Look how short that prompt is. I just want to let you know that the mistakes Midjourney makes with missing and drop details and blending and bleeding and incoherence is not because of the length of your prompt. So let's see. This guy's leg is on backwards. This guy, I don't know what's happening here. It's awful. This person's whole torso is messed up. This person has an arm. I'm sorry. This is hilarious. What do you call the? What do you call the alien that lives that bursts out of the chest? Oh, it's just alien. Okay. I was laughing really hard. This is all messed up, you guys. This is incoherence. Okay, look at, oh God, that's hard to look at. The AI absolutely knows that it's producing incoherence. It is smart enough to know that this is incoherent. And that brings me to my next point. So, blending and bleeding is when you have a bunch of subjects, right? And they all overlap. Bleeding is when you have one subject and it ends up everywhere. So you have something like that and it ends up everywhere. Incoherence is when Midjourney has way too many correct answers. So that's my little human figure, right? And he's going to turn a cartwheel, which means that his arm could go there or there or there or there or there or there or any of these places, and his other arm could go in all these directions. All these things are correct placements for his arms. And his legs could go any of these places. These are correct placements for his legs. And his head could be here, or it could be in any of these places when doing a cartwheel. Doing a cartwheel means all of those things are correct. So, well, this now looks like a biblical angel. so then you have a biblical angel. And it's not that it's overwhelmed by too many choices. It's that, there's the duration of the job that we've purchased. We purchase from you've purchased minutes from Midjourney, right? So your job has a certain each imagine time. Each time you enter a prompt, it's a job that has a certain fixed amount of time. And so what Midjourney's doing is, it's like it's interpreting the arms and it's interpreting the legs and it's interpreting the head and it's trying to figure out what's right. It has a correction routine that we'll talk about that's running on top. And oh my God, we've run out of time. So we've run out of time. It's called conditioning. Making sure that it's conditioning and stylization. Making sure that things are pretty and correct. And it takes more time than we have bought for the job. And when all of that correction mechanism takes longer than the time we have for that single job, then you start seeing incoherence, blending and bleeding, and missing and drop details. Because in each of these cases, it's falling off the end of the duration of the job. We're going to talk more about that. Do you find the drawing of the guy with the alarm clock relatable? So those are the three basic mistakes that Midjourney makes. Let me stop and just and ask this. Which annoys you more? If you have, I mean, for me, I think blending and bleeding annoy me the most because that's the hardest one for me to solve. Yeah, bleeding sneaks up on you, right? Entanglement, leakage. Just get it right already. Yeah. Incoherent weirdness, really. Missing details. Yeah, for sure. So the next question everyone asks is, fine, we know, what can we do? What can we do? What can we do, for God's sake, if this is the case? The first thing, what, Nim, what? Why, whoa? Hi, Nim. Okay. Nim, do you need me to slow down? What this right here? That's no video. That's my drawing. Am I pointing at it? Okay. So the first thing we can do is make sure we're actually in control. That's really the first step is control. We should make sure we're in control of the canvas. If it's not controlled with the prompt, Midjourney defaults to its own learned stereotypes, which we call archetypes, and we'll talk about that if we have time. Another word for you. We have to make sure we're owning the canvas. We're the artists. We're the artists, not Midjourney. And when we're trying to do prompt adherence, we're the artists. So the most basic troubleshooting step is to ask yourself, am I controlling it? At the most fundamental level, we want to make sure our prompt addresses the full digital composition. So what do I mean by the full digital composition? We have the subject, which is the focal point of our picture. We have the background, which is the context of the subject. And we have the style, which is the aesthetic or aesthetic, which is how the subject is rendered. So we have the subject, the background, and then the style would be like the whole thing. Subject, background, style. So for example, let's look at Midjourney again. A woman drinks. Oops. All right. One moment, please. Okay. A woman drinks from an owl-shaped mug sitting in a cafe, editorial photography. So what I want to do with that, I just had to time out the guy for a sec. What I had to do with that is, make sure we can identify the subject, the background, and the style. Because that's the first troubleshooting step. If your prompt doesn't control it, Midjourney makes it up. Your prompt needs to address the focal point of the composition, the context, and the aesthetic. So a woman drinks from an owl-shaped mug sitting in a cafe. What is the focal point? Welcome, Steel Horses. Welcome, Monique, Promptogram. AJ Hydro. Hemo says the woman is the focal point. Okay. And what is the aesthetic style of this prompt? Editorial photo. Very good. Very good, Steel Horses. And what is the context or background? The cafe. Very good, you guys. Okay, so this prompt then has a fighting chance of working because at least it controls the canvas. So one of the questions I've sometimes asked is, oh, cool. So is this a prompt template? Can I just put everything in the order of subject, background, and style? Well, I mean, it could function like one, but it's really more of a checklist. So you have your subject is something you need to cover, and your background and your style. So if you make this a checklist, and imagine you had a really, really long prompt, you know, and what you'd have to do is say like, okay, do I have my subject in here? Okay, here's the subject. Great. And I talk about it a bit here too. This is the background. Where do I describe the background? Okay, I open with the background. And you know, here's the style or aesthetic. Where do I put that? There. Great. So, you know, I've covered all three of those things, it just in various places in the prompt. Right. They're just it's just all over the place, which is fine. So it's not really a template. It's more of a checklist. So just make sure you're controlling the canvas, because otherwise you don't even have a fighting chance. That's why we start with that. And here are some notes on that. So control it yourself. Which is more you? Do you feel like you're typically the artist? Do you feel like you're maybe in a codependent relationship? Feel like you work for the algorithm for minimum wage? How are you with controlling it yourself? What about order? The order matters. The order doesn't matter a whole lot, Himbo. The order matters more in what you're saying, in the way your sentence is formed, and less in the order in which it appears in the prompt. We can talk about that for just a second. So that is an FAQ. What about prompt ordering? Because once upon a time, we imagined there was, like, in versions 1 through version 5, there was something called a slope of influence. And what it said was stuff at the beginning of the prompt was slightly, if this is X and Y, and this is the front of the prompt down to the end of the prompt, the influence was higher up here, so it's better, and then it got worse and worse and worse until finally the end of your prompt was ignored. But this is no longer the case. Right now, our slope of influence is pretty flat. Okay, so what makes the difference instead is the focal point of the sentence. What's a subject? What's a direct object? Let me explain. So let's say you have you want to say a pond, and you want to say it's surrounded by willow trees. Okay, these are my willow trees. A pond surrounded by willow trees. Let's see if I don't think I have brown in here, you guys. We'll grab a brown so that we can have willow tree trunks in there. So if you want a pond surrounded by willow trees, you'll probably get a pond in the center of the picture with willow trees around it. But if you say willow trees surround a pond, right, then all of a sudden what you'll probably get is willow trees, big time, and the pond will, you know, maybe be small or off to the side or something like that. Pond surrounded by willow trees surround a pond. Why? Because the sentence itself has shifted the importance of the subject and the direct object. So this kind of ordering is vital. If you are, you know, if you're trying to say, an owl holds a die in its claw, in its foot, or whatever, and you can't see the die, then say a die is held by an owl. By this, I mean a gaming dice, right? The reversing the topic or focus of the sentence matters, but the order in the prompt like this doesn't matter. Whether that willow tree sentence is here or here, it matters less than in what order you have organized your words. Does that make sense, you guys? That's the subject versus direct object. That's what it is grammatically, I think. Okay. Yeah, reverse it. Getting all Missy Elliott now. Okay. So I'm going back to looking at Midjourney for a second, because some problems, we'll just acknowledge some problems can't be solved with prompting. In our sort of advanced classes, such as they are, you can learn when you need to use multiple steps involving the editor or retexture or remix references. But as beginners, we explore prompting more than once to chase the image we want. We write the very best prompt we can. And once we're, the one we're convinced will do the trick. Because at the very least, we've done the background and the style and the subject and seems clear. But if it doesn't do the trick, we tweak the prompt. So let's talk about tweaking the prompt. That is the second troubleshooting step. The first one is to make sure you have a fighting chance controlling the canvas. The second one is to prompt more than once. You need to know what the prompt will do, and then you need to prompt again to support the details Midjourney misses. So you write the very best prompt that you think is going to work, and then you add descriptive support for the details Midjourney got wrong. And add clarity in the form of correct punctuation and grammar and spelling as well, if that will help, and we'll talk about that. So we're looking at a woman drinks from an owl-shaped mug sitting in a cafe, editorial photography. Midjourney did a pretty good job with this. I mean, it is all those things. It is a woman, and she's drinking from an owl-shaped mug, and she's sitting in the cafe, and maybe it looks like editorial photography. I think so, especially this one where she's looking off to the side. But my problem with it is that she's holding her owl-shaped mug like a sippy cup with two hands like this, and I don't like the way that looks. I think that the owl-shaped mug should be held, with one hand, thusly, and not clutched. So Midjourney will strive to obey the prompt. That's its number one thing that it's going to try to do. So the first step in tweaking the prompt is to add descriptive support for the details Midjourney got wrong. Okay, what did Midjourney get wrong for me? She's holding it in two hands. So what should I say in the prompt? She's holding it in one hand. So let's try that. I don't think you can, I don't know. It could. I mean, you could play with the wings and make them handles, I suppose. Isn't he cute? Okay. So, oh, great. Here we go. A woman holds an owl-shaped mug in one hand, sitting in a couch. She is holding it in one hand. Now she's holding it like this. I guess that's one sort of, I don't know. But the worst thing about this is that when I spent more time on the mug, remember subject, background, style, the focal point changed because I added detail. This is an important lesson. The focal point changed because I added detail. Guys, if the focal point changes and you didn't want it to, now you know why. Perhaps it's because Midjourney got confused because there's a lot of time spent on the thing that it put the camera on. The other thing you can learn from this is, how do you control the camera? Spend more time on the detail. So if I want to take the camera up from the mug back to her face, what do you suggest that I do in the prompt? If I want to lift the camera up to her face, I added, focus on her face somehow, describe the face, right? We noticed that when I added a detail to the mug, the camera dropped down to the mug. So when I add a detail to her face, maybe the camera will lift back up to her face if I spend enough time on her face. So let's try that. Now I said a woman with brown eyes and hair in a messy bun holds an owl-shaped mug in one hand, sitting in a cafe, editorial photography. Aha! It brought the camera back up to her face. And at least in two of them, she's still doing the sort of quasi holding the mug with one hand thing, not really, sort of. So I've still got to work on this if I want her to hold the mug with just one hand thusly. So what do you guys suggest? We have to control it. Remember, this is all about control. We controlled the camera by moving it according to the details. So Ipsady says, well, it acts like she has to do something with each hand. So I think Ipsady's really onto something. Maybe entertain her other hand. Right. So if it's up to us to control things, you guys, swing, signature. Yeah. Prompt her other hand doing something else, says Mary Smith. Her left hand should rest on the table or by her side, one hand on the table. Exactly. So let's try it. Let's say a woman with brown eyes and hair in a messy bun holds an owl-shaped mug in one hand and her phone in the other. I'm going to give her other hand something to do. I'm going to give her other hand something to do. Or she picks her ear with the other hand, something like that. Aha! This is good. She is now holding the mug correctly, but at least in one, we've got the mug and the owl separated. That might be because it says a woman holds an owl - shaped mug in one hand. So holds an owl is there. You see this phrase in this prompt, holds an owl? Maybe that was confusing. What if I broke this up into individual sentences so that everything is very clear? That cleared it up. Editorial photography of a boho woman with brown eyes, period. Her hairstyle is in a messy bun, period. In one hand, she is holding a mug in the shape of an owl. Do you see how holding a mug is now more clear and then it's modified by shape of an owl? And owl and holding are further apart in the prompt. And she is holding her iPhone in the other hand and she's sitting in a cafe. So in case you weren't sure whether punctuation, grammar, and spelling can matter in Midjourney, they can. For example, if I make a panda eat some bamboo here, here's a panda eating some bamboo. But if I say, instead of a panda eats shoots and leaves, a panda eats shoots and leaves, and I make it, a list of actions. A panda eats, shoots, and leaves. Now the panda has a cigarette and some rifles. And in this one, it looks like he's smoking a rifle and holding a cigarette. But you get the idea. If nothing else tells you that punctuation and spelling and grammar can matter. It's not that you have to write like you wrote in school. Write your prompt any way you like. There's no right way to prompt. There is a right way to troubleshoot, which is if things are getting incoherent, if they're messing up, try making a pass over your prompt and just neatening it up for sentence structure, spelling, and grammar. It might help. As you can see, it does matter. It might not help, but it might help. It's a good troubleshooting step. So that's troubleshooting step number 2. Troubleshooting step number 1, make sure you have a fighting chance. Make sure you're in control of the whole canvas, that Midjourney isn't making up any part of your canvas for you. Second thing you're going to do is note where the mistakes are and surgically apply corrections to that with additional details or with punctuation, spelling, and grammar, or both. Experiment. These are troubleshooting steps. These are not ways to write prompts. So I'm also going to show what happens when you write a good sentence that's bad for AI. It does lose the plot. So, for example, remember, it's not because this prompt is long. It's because of what this prompt says. Her hair was in a bun, the kind of bun that had been undone and redone so many times it stopped pretending to be neat. Her eyes were brown, her hair was brown, and she sat in the cafe like she had always been there. What stood out was the mug. It was shaped like an owl, but in the way certain shops make owls fashionable. Its wide ceramic eyes and carved feathers carried the self-conscious air of stylish purchase, the kind of thing you find near vinyl records and soy candles. She held the mug in one hand and her phone in the other, each item a small declaration of her belonging, or her wanting to belong, in a place where even your coffee cup said something about you. Ah, man, that is so meaningful to a human reader, but it did not produce the right results because there are a lot of tokens here, words that are not going to play well with Midjourney. Abstract, non-visual words. And we'll return to that when we talk about chaotic tokens. One of the biggest reasons to point out this literary style prompting is because a lot of people use an untrained ChatGPT to write a prompt, or an untrained Gemini, or an untrained Claude, right? And they just say, write a prompt for Midjourney, and it doesn't have the right information, or it has information from whatever masterclass it Google searched, or it has information from 3 years ago when it first got its training, right? So your untrained ChatGPT is going to give you unproductive results a lot like this, which, as you can see, do not help you control the canvas. Okay, so we just spent a lot of time talking about prompt again. How are you guys doing? Do you get why we iterate, why we prompt more than once? See how refining prompts builds control? You can tell me yep, kind of, or no. Mary Smith says yes. Trial and error, Giubis and Abby both have a green there. If Sadie says a process for sure. Swing says a very good class. Oh, great, Swing. I saw you came in from YouTube over to here. Awesome. So the next thing we want to talk about is, why do some things work and some things don't? I mean, we've talked about the problems we have. Why does it happen? What's the mystery? How can we guess what's going to go wrong based on knowledge? That's why we're going to spend time on how Midjourney works. Because I want you to get at least the gist of it so that you can bring that to your prompting. This is very, very teach a man to fish, right? I'm going to teach you to fish rather than just teach you, there's no prompt template or something. I'm going to teach you how to think about what Midjourney's doing. So why does Midjourney work the way it does? And sometimes why doesn't it is the big question. And the answer is that the whole process might look magical, but it's in 3 stages that we can understand. 3 stages. So let's talk about those 3 stages. 3 stages. 1, 2, and 3. There, that one snapped. Stage 1 is training. Stage 2 is diffusion. Don't worry if you don't know these words, I will help you. Stage 3 is denoising. So let's step through these stages, okay? Training begins with data sets like Lion. Lion, what's that? It's actually a nonprofit group that scrapes images and captions from across the internet. Midjourney doesn't scrape. Did you know that, Swing? MJ, lights out publication. Good to see you. Midjourney doesn't do any scraping. What we do is we purchase a data set from Lion, and then we curate it ourselves. And that curation matters. We filter for beauty. We filter for usefulness for artists. We filter for ethical use, right? We cut out screenshots. We cut out pornography, anything that doesn't serve the creative practice that we at Midjourney want to support. So while Lion Scrape is like broad and messy and sort of everything, Midjourney actually, the set Midjourney actually trains on is hand-selected and refined. And the model needs to learn correlations. Correlations. Which words align with which shapes and colors and textures, okay? So it gets the words from captions and tags and alt text. So in my example here, we have what looks like a little scrape of flowers. So the words that it would have picked up might be, call them out for me, you guys. Flowers, botany, maybe. I don't know. What else do you guys think? Vines. Oh, I like that. Leaf. Floral. Petals. Foliage. Good, Mary Smith. Foliage. Horticulture, maybe. Vegetation. Garden. Blooms. Did I already say blooms? No. Easter, maybe. Bouquet. Right? So these words go on and on and on that are correlated to these shapes, colors, textures, pixel patterns. So Midjourney, this is an eye. I'm going to draw an eye. This is Midjourney. And Midjourney is looking at all of these images. It needs eyelashes. It just must have eyelashes. Is looking at all of these images and correlations and keeping them in its brain. And AIs don't have, or Midjourney doesn't have a brain the way, I mean, it's obviously not a meat brain. And in fact, it's just unbrain-like enough, or perhaps it's just brain-like enough that we don't even call it brain-like words. We call it latent space. That's what this cube is, latent space. And it's not 3-dimensional, although it is in my drawing. It is orthogonally dimensional. I don't know how many dimensions it has. Way more than I can count. But you can see the correlation here between the shapes, colors, and textures in the words. Do you see how the colors are repeated in the latent space? Drawn in from the training set? So it gets the shapes, colors, and textures by, here comes the word, diffusing and denoising. Back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. I'll show you what I mean. Picture every photo on the internet or every photo in our group of flowers there. I'm getting turned into TV static. Just like this. See if I can rotate it. I'd like to do that. Can I rotate it? There we go. So our picture of a flower, do I have a picture of a flower ready to go? I do. Our picture of a flower, okay. Gets turned into TV static. Stage by stage, wave by wave, step by step. It gets turned from a picture of a flower into television static. And then, slowly but surely, it learns how to take the static and turn it back into a picture of a flower. So it goes this direction, right? And then it goes this direction. And this process is called diffusion. And this process is called denoising. Makes sense that it's denoising, right? Because it's taking it from this random scramble to a believable picture that has, you know, shape and color. Diffusion refers to the forward process of adding noise. This side. Denoising is the learned inverse mapping. So in diffusing, every training image is gradually turned into static visual noise in a series of controlled steps. In denoising, at each step, the model also learns how to reverse that specific recipe of noise back into the original picture. So that, and it does this over and over and over, back and forth, a million times for a million pictures. And around and around and around and around and around and around. That's the training phase, the study phase. It's learning correlations to pixel patterns. Diffusion is the skill that it learns. This diffusion or denoising is a skill that it learns. But that skill is not applied until we come along with the prompt. So let me check how you guys are doing here. Are you still tracking? Are you with me? Tracking well enough for now? Waiting to hear more before it clicks? Do you need me to go over this one more time? Does the semantic understanding happen somewhere? There's not, no, yes. When I get to conditioning, remind me to talk about it. Javaku has a thumbs up. Excellent. How are you doing out there on YouTube? Okay. Right. So, denoising is the skill of making the static turn into a picture, the picture we asked for. But that skill isn't applied until we come along with a prompt. So let's come along with a prompt, shall we? Here's a prompt, a vintage flower bed. So we show up with our prompt. So far, we've been looking at how the machine learns, and now we switch to how it listens. So Midjourney starts, as I said, with a patch of random noise. Here we go. a random static made with the same math the model practiced on. So it's not any old static. It's static made with the same math the model practiced on, and that's called the seed. It looks like television static. And then step by step in waves, the model applies what it learned to sculpt that static into an image that matches your prompt. Right? It's doing that 4 times, obviously. It's doing it once for this one, and once for this one, and once for this one, and once for this one. We get a batch of 4. This is called a batch. In case you were wondering what that list of 4 is, it's your batch of 4. That's the application of the diffusion denoising skill that it learned in training. Once we're actually placing pixel patterns, it's called denoising, as I said before. Denoising. Because it's literally denoising the noise into an image. In fact, Midjourney shows us its denoising process every time we prompt. That's that progress animation we see. Like if I rerun this, you actually see, depending on how many frames we get, we'll actually see, we almost saw the seed. And now we're seeing the seed getting denoised into this image. Thank you. If I rerun this, you almost see the seed at the front. See that? And then it rapidly denoises. This is not actually the denoising process. Midjourney selects some frames for you and shows it to you as a progress. So it gives you the impression of the denoising process, but it is not literally the denoising. I don't know why I find that important to say. It's the impression of the denoising process. What is being changed in each grid item, each picture in the grid? I don't know. I think the seed is being interpreted in 4 different ways, which is normal because it's random. And there are probably some other apps running in the background that help control the variety and what happens to each grid, to each item in the batch. I really need to call it a batch because it's only in Discord that it appears to be a grid. Obviously on the web, it is not a grid, it is a row. So any questions about diffusion or denoising? If you have no questions, type NQ or no questions. And I'm going to have to find out why the cam keeps turning off. Crazy, right? All right. It's actually not like coupling and decoupling the data. Well, okay, I'll take it. I'll take it, Swing. That's not a bad metaphor. What do you guys think? I think that's okay. So the training data, I imagine he means. I think he's talking about this process here, where it turns a picture into math and then it turns the math back into a picture. Giubis, it does. So you might remember that we talked earlier about the fact that Midjourney has to do all of this in the fixed duration of the job. Remember, we buy Cubus, we buy minutes from Midjourney, right? We buy minutes from Midjourney, and it's a fixed number of minutes. And so Midjourney has to kind of get everything done in that amount of time. So, you know, it has to deal with the prompt, and then, you know, it has to do something else, which I'm going to go into all the things it has to do. And it has to do another thing, and then it has to do another thing, and it has to do another thing. And then before you know it, it's run out of time. And everything else it has to do, it can't do it anymore. Right? And it runs out of time. And this is where all the mistakes Midjourney makes comes from, is that it has run out of time to finish the job. So what quality does is say, let's increase the duration of the job. So now he's talking about quality, which is -Q. -Q quality. Okay. So does that increase the duration of the job? Yes. We have several qualities of Q. We have Q 0.5, 1.0, 2.0, and 4.0. Those are the only quality values that are accepted. If you use anything in between all of these, it'll round to one of them. Okay. I am going to fix my cam again. Call out if that cam stops working. Although, I mean, you're mostly looking at the picture, so that's okay. Half the time spent on your prompt is draft mode. You guys know draft mode, right? --draft is the same thing as 0.5. 1.0 is the default. 2.0 spends twice the minutes, and 4.0 spends 4 times the minutes. I don't know what the math is for that. So you'd expect, wouldn't you, Cubus, that all your problems would be solved by using Q4. Does anyone else make that conclusion? I certainly made that conclusion. I was like, well, shit. If my prompt seems broken and the problem is that I'm running out of time, I'll just use Q4. Duh. But that's not how it works. Ladies and gentlemen, I actually have to stop and clean my glasses. I know. That's not how it works. That's not how it works. So the things that are happening in the duration of the job here, I'm going to do another little duration of the job drawing here to give you an idea. The things that are happening in this job are actually interpreting your prompt, okay? And it's not really, everything takes the full amount of time, in a sense. So it's interpreting your prompt and then whatever runs off. But then also making sure that it got everything beautiful. And then also making sure that it got everything coherent and correct, and that it adheres to your prompt. Notice they all flow off the top. So all of these things have names, these things that it does. Hold on, I'm getting the color. Okay, so this is stylization. And this is conditioning. Conditioning is prompt adherence. Is what I have drawn, is what I have drawn on the screen, does it match the prompt? Is it eat shoots and leaves? Does it, you know, is it it treats the prompt like a checklist, right? Treats the prompt like a checklist, and it says, okay, I got all these things in there. That's what we're most interested in, is the checklist, the conditioning, right? Stylization, this is coherency, beauty, and other things, level of detail. And then this is prompt interpretation at all. Interpretation at all. I mean, I don't know. There's lots of other things happening. So for Q, Giubus, are you with me? What you're really hoping is to give more time to conditioning, because that's the prompt adherence thing. But Q is an app that only gives more time to stylization. Conditioning is still cut off. Prompt interpretation is still cut off. Yay! Stylization, whoops, I grabbed the wrong color. Stylization gets more time. Yay, stylization. Why? Because Midjourney is a tool for exploring aesthetics. So quality affects stylization, beauty, detail, but not conditioning. You cannot improve the conditioning time. The conditioning time is locked down. Also sometimes called attention. It's locked down. You are stuck with a fixed amount of conditioning, but you can extend stylization using Q. And you can shorten things. Himbo, you can always set stylize down to 50 or something, right? And then it's doing less, and that accidentally leaves more time for other things. So you can drop stylize. You can use raw, which also drops stylize. You can write really, really great prompts. Great prompts, which reduce the amount of time needed by attention and conditioning. Thanks, Himbo. If you weren't in the class listening to me talk you through this doodle would make no sense at all. Okay. Giubus, how are we doing? Did that answer your question? Gray Benbach. Okay, excellent. Giubus, I'm glad to hear that. Promptogram says, does Midjourney learn from the previous prompts? It does not. Every job is sovereign. It exists alone. Midjourney has no memory between jobs, between sessions, between prompts. No memory at all. So it is very easy for us to feel like as we prompt, like I'm prompting stuff, and then all of a sudden, you know, an hour ago, I was prompting elephants, and now, wow, it's weird how every time I ask for an animal, an elephant shows up. Like, did Midjourney learn from me that animal for me means elephant? Like, a lot of people come away from using Midjourney and think, whoa, like I was prompting pandas a lot, and then the next time I didn't even mention pandas, and still pandas showed up. So Midjourney is learning from me, right? The answer is Midjourney is not capable of learning from you. When you have the feeling, like you feel like it's freaking science, that you have evidence that Midjourney has learned from you, it's still not learning from you. Not from job to job or from session to session. Himbo's right. The only mechanism by which we can talk to Midjourney besides our prompt is with our mood boards and our profiles. That's data that we've that we've collected and that Midjourney can draw on through the --p parameter. And it and the prompt come from us. It's not really training or teaching Midjourney anything, but it is giving Midjourney a place to, it's giving Midjourney information as it runs the job. But I get accidental alligator helicopters. Explain that. You missed the part where I explained that. I specifically went through alligator helicopters. Not really. I didn't really do that. Okay. So we were here with our vintage flower bed. Do you guys want to take a break real quick before we go on? 5 minutes? Or should I just push through? Okay, Sympholia, it was really great to see you. All right, let's do a break. Coffee break. We will be back in 5 minutes. Okay, we are starting to come back from our break. Welcome back. Welcome back, welcome back. Excellent. Glad you had time to get some tea or coffee. So, how does your prompt control this denoising that we've been talking about and actually make the image you're describing? Now that's a fun story, and I'm glad we've come back from our break all rested and ready to hear this fun story, because I did promise you bees. So far we've talked about how the image forms itself. Now let's switch lenses. We're going to talk about how you talk to it, okay? So think of every word in your prompt like bees, a swarm of bees. Technically, every word in your prompt is called a token, but we're going to call them bees for now. A prompt is like a swarm of bees. The swarm flies in to the model's math world, which again we called latent space. It's the model's math brain is the latent space. They fly in there. Meow. Okay. And they gather pollen. And the pollen they gather are actually the rules for textures and shapes and colors and lighting, everything else that they learned during the model's prior training when it correlated images and words together. So they leave the latent space loaded with pollen. Strong token bees return loaded with pollen. They carry a big visual influence into the image. Weak token bees, here's a little weak token bee, comes back with barely any pollen. So a subtle influence easy to drown out. Okay, maybe these are the subtler influences. And then there's ambiguous token bees that sometimes bring unexpected pollen. Like you say declaration, hoping for a declaration of love, romance, right? And the bee shows up with parchment scrolls and quills and 18th century typography because declaration was more strongly associated with the Declaration of Independence. Oops. So declaration, ambiguous token. Joining other ambiguous tokens would be like HD, 16K, 4K, HDR, ISO 1000 or whatever. I don't know. Call out some other ones. Trending on ArtStation. Let's see. Unreal Engine is a classic. 16K, hyper detailed. Commission for, is that's showing up? Never heard of that one. Commission for. Super realism, that's a good one. Signature, you're blushing. I can't believe how beautiful this is. Yeah, all of the fidelity terms. All of the fidelity terms, like hyper, super, amazing. All mostly camera metadata. Right. You lose control of the canvas. It's not that those bees come back with nothing, Signature. They're coming back with stuff. In fact, CG Society, that's a good one. It's not that they're coming back with nothing. They're valid. They're coming back with something, but it might be a little bit ambiguous what they're doing for you. But if you like it, there's no right way to prompt. There's no right way to prompt. If you like what these terms are doing, whatever it is they're doing, like we can't really tell you, but if you like it, then freaking keep it, dude. I mean, we're artists. We can slap whatever we want onto our canvas. I mean, there are artists that insist on using eggshells in their paint, and a lot of people are like, "Why are you putting ground eggshells in your paint?" And they're like, "It has a je ne sais quoi." That is what I want. Something about the eggshells adds a white reflective value that brightens my colors. I don't see it. I see it. Okay. Right? Like, we're never going to say that artist is wrong or broken or something. We're just like, we're all artists. We do what we want to do. There is no right way to prompt. But there is a right way to troubleshoot signatures. So all I'm saying is, if you're writing the prompt with all of those tokens in it, and the prompt isn't turning out the way you expect or the way you desire, one of the troubleshooting steps is like, all right, I'm going to take out my eggshells. I'm going to take out HD, 16K, 4K, HDR, whatever. I'm going to take them out just to see if it helps. Maybe it'll help. Maybe it won't. You can put them back in, but it's a good troubleshooting step. So the bees are coming back with all of this pollen is where we are in our story. And when your job timer runs out, which we've talked about, whoops, I'm going to pause and look at this question. Are they consistent? Do the bees bring consistent objects related to the same words? No. Nope. The bees are drunk because the seed is random. So they don't, it's not consistent. The other thing is that all of these bees are connected they're connected to each other. Can you see me drawing these lines? They're connected to each other. All of them are connected to all of them. Right? So it's a big entanglement. So if this bee flies off in a certain direction toward bed, it kind of drags the other bees with it in that trajectory. And meanwhile, simultaneously, this bee is trying to go get flour. So all of these bees are dragged this way simultaneously a little bit. And then this word pulls them all this way a little bit. So you might have used the word flower in 2 prompts, but because the other bees are not the same as vintage flower in bed, because you talked about floral curtains this time, the word curtain pulls it in a slightly different direction, right? They're all on these elastic bands. So you can't possibly get a consistent response back. Not unless you do a lot of things, like you have to use exactly the same prompt to the letter, the same punctuation, the same words, the same order, the same spacing, the same everything, exactly the same. Plus, you have to use exactly the same seed. If you can get the seed and the prompt exactly the same, and you're using exactly the same version with exactly all the parameters, and you've duplicated everything exactly, you might get the same thing back. But other than that, you can picture the bee, flying hard as it can toward a certain word, but it's attached to all the other bees and it's being dragged. They're all simultaneously flying in the directions they need to go to get their pollen. So all the bees are like, have to reach flower. And then meanwhile, the one that's got the word golden is like, haha, I have to reach golden, and it's flying that direction. And they're right. No, the bees do not understand. Semantic identification might produce more bees, but the bees themselves have no understanding. There's no language understanding in baseball, in Midjourney. Okay, so remember we talked about the duration of the job? And before I was just drawing colors randomly for you guys about like what Midjourney's doing. Now I'm going to draw colors more specifically. So Midjourney has to interpret the prompt, vintage, and it has to interpret flower. It has to interpret bed, but it also has to interpret, it has to interpret A. And it has to interpret, Midjourney does all of this simultaneously. So we have a vintage flower bed, but Midjourney is not just looking at a vintage flower bed. It's looking at a vintage flower bed, a vintage flower bed, and then of course a vintage flower and bed. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So this tiny prompt produces 9 interpretations. And of course, if we had punctuation in here, it would also affect that. So it's gotta do that. Where's my checklist? Hold on. So it's got to do that 9 times. And it's also got to remember, this is the pixel patterns, the rules for the shapes and the colors and things. So it's also got to make sure that's correct. So, and then it's also got to make everything beautiful or coherent. So I'm running out of colors, you guys. Okay, so here also, the whole time it's doing that, it's trying to make things coherent. And the whole time it's doing that, it's also trying to make sure things are correct according to the prompt. Can't use black because then I can't draw on it. Okay. So I've already told you what these things are. I've already told you it's conditioning for prompt adherence. And stylization for beauty and coherence. And that's got other things running too that are top secret. So I'm just going to put a big black space here that's taking up other things that we don't know. So the model, when your job timer runs out, it's not just the bees getting cut off mid-flight. That swarm is only one part of the work, is what I'm trying to tell you. The model is also weighing competing token embeddings, which I already told you the bees are attached to each other. So the model is weighing competing token embeddings, little clusters of learned meanings. So learned meanings, if I can enunciate, for words like vintage and flower and bed. So each of those has several visual interpretations baked in from the training, right? Vintage, what does vintage mean? Old-fashioned color grading. Could mean antique objects. Could mean the 1970s, right? Vintage, it could mean wine. What about flower? Flower can mean a single bloom. It could be a garden. It could be a diagram. Bed can mean furniture, obviously. It can mean soil, a flower bed. So when those embeddings overlap, The model has to pick a direction in that tug of war, right? A vintage flower, a vintage bed, a bed of flowers, or a bedspread with a floral print. So there's all of this going on in this limited amount of time. And I didn't tell you what embeddings were. I'm sorry. Remember when I said the bees flew in to the latent space and grabbed pollen? The embeddings, the pollen is actually called an embedding. That's what the pollen is called. I'm calling it pollen. If you ever leave this class and want to sound smart, remember it's called the embeddings. Why? Because it's like it's embedded. I'm zooming way in here. It's like it's in little embeddings in the latent space. And the bees come and scoop out these little embeddings, right? They're embedded in the latent space. That's why they're called embeddings. So although I'm calling it pollen, it's really embeddings. So the model has to decide between all of these things. And how does that work? I think I mentioned archetypes before. There are statistically dominant patterns in this training. So let's run a vintage flower bed, shall we? A vintage flower bed. So as you can see, in some cases, just making sure I'm sharing this right, I am. In some cases, you see that Midjourney very happily created a flower bed instead of a flower bed. This is what I mean by the embeddings overlap. Remember I said earlier you'd understand about entanglement and leakage? And I told you the bees are all connected by dotted lines. Entanglement, they're entangled. The embeddings are entangled. The bees are tangled up with each other. This is why we get flower beds instead of flower beds. How can I fix it? Remember I said one of the things you can fix is correcting your spelling and grammar? Well, it turns out that flower bed is one word. So the moment I give it just the one word, my bees are not confused anymore. Now I get vintage flower beds. So you can see how we control our bees. We control, the prompt is the most powerful force in Midjourney. Because the prompt, it ends up being something like a checklist. The prompt ends up being something like these bees. And everything runs on the same clock. One time budget, many jobs. When that clock hits 0, everything freezes. Whatever it was, bees, conditioning, stylization, all of it freezes. So what matters most to us as artists is how Midjourney checks that it's actually getting the image right. And conditioning is that model's checklist. Does this picture look coherent? Does it match the prompt signal? At every denoising step, it's glancing at 2 things. Your checklist. See if I can bring you back to this. It's glancing at 2 things. Your checklist, which is the prompt, and what the bees brought back, which is the embeddings. It's checking the prompt and the embeddings, and the prompt and the embeddings, and the prompt and the embeddings. You know what this is called? Cross attention. Do you see why it's called cross attention? Because it has to look at both of these things at the same time. Wonderful world of stuff. You wanted more words. This is for you. Cross attention, the back and forth checking. I got to make sure the patterns and rules are right. I got to make sure that it adheres to the prompt. I have to make sure that I'm getting the rules right. I have to make sure it adheres to the prompt. It has to be beautiful. It has to be beautiful. It has to be beautiful. Running out of time is just one of many reasons why prompt adherence isn't always perfect. The cross attention fails. The conditioning runs out of time. Increasing quality increases stylization attention only. Some tokens are ambiguous. Some meanings overlap. Common patterns in training, which we call archetypes, can pull the result towards statistically dominant representations of the training data. The archetypes. And sometimes what we've asked for just isn't represented strongly enough in the training data for a coherent picture to form. We asked for something that has representation sparsity. How's that, Wendy? Semantic sparsity. An embedding desert. A low-density region in latent space. That's when we ask for something that Midjourney doesn't know anything about. Like we say, a llama-shaped mug. Midjourney's like, I don't know what a llama-shaped mug is. I know llamas, I know mugs. There's an embedding desert. The bee shows up. The bee is like, give me the pollen, and there's nothing there. So that's another reason why our prompts can fail. So this is why we spend so much time looking under the hood, okay? Because our troubleshooting steps depend on knowing how Midjourney actually works, that it has limited time, that it defaults to statistically dominant archetypes, that it sends out a swarm of token bees instead of parsing sentences. It is not parsing sentences. Think swarm. Once you understand those limits, you can puzzle over its mistakes the way you puzzle over a curious nautical map that you've almost learned how to read. Okay, you stop asking, what's the right way to write this prompt? And you start asking, how can I use this prompt to steer the boat? How can I use this prompt to steer the boat? Do you see why Midjourney's logo is a sailboat? Because we are steering through latent space. That is the metaphor that David Holtz thought of when he picked this sailboat. We are steering through latent space. And now you understand what that means. And that's why, given both the time budget and the limits of language, right? The most effective way to improve your results is still the simplest: troubleshoot the prompt. Prompt design is the artist's lever of control. So let me check how you guys are doing on this stuff. Training, denoising, token bees, conditioning, how you doing? I don't expect that those of you who are new to this are getting it right away. A lot of people come to this class more than once, hear lots of different things. It's a lot to take on. It's a lot to take on. If people looked at this sketch and didn't know what we were talking about, man, it would be hard to understand. Need more time to think? Promptogram says, is there anything you can do if your prompt is not in the training data set? Not really. Mary Smith says you can use OREFs, but that doesn't work. And let me explain why that doesn't work. So it works a little, but not a lot. So let's say you give it an OREF. That's an omni reference, you guys, of something that Midjourney doesn't know what it is. I don't know. It's this thing. Midjourney has no idea what this thing is. Neither do we. And here's Midjourney's brain. So what you expect Midjourney to do is to take the OREF and just frickin' copy it over to your prompt and just use it. Right? That's what we hope. Midjourney, I have an OREF, just please use it. And by the way, my prompt says to give it a radiant red lines. So that's what I want you to do. Take this OREF and add radiant red lines, please. Okay. But that's not actually how OREF works. Damn. It's not how it works. So put this out of your mind. Let me show you how it really works. Midjourney. Here's Midjourney's eye. Midjourney looks at what you've got here, and it looks at the background, and it looks at the subject, and it looks at the style, and it looks at the features of the thing, the shape, and it takes those things into its head. Where are my bees? It takes those things into its head, and again, instead of vintage flower bed now, it has whatever it's discovered from looking at your picture. And it tries to find matches of stuff in your picture. So if this is a Luxabiddleproc, let's say that you know that this is a Luxabiddleproc. And you're like, Midjourney doesn't know what a Luxabiddleproc is, so I'm going to give it a picture of a Luxabiddleproc, right? So Midjourney goes into its head in its latent space, and it looks for Luxabiddleproc. Remember, we gave it a Luxabiddleproc because it doesn't know what a Luxabiddleproc is. So it looks in there for Luxabiddleproc, and of course, we gave it Luxabiddleproc because it doesn't know what Luxabiddleproc is. So when the bee with Luxabiddleproc goes in there to go, you know what it comes up with? Nothing. So when it comes back out, it still doesn't know what it is. But it knows that it's black and that it has curves. And, you know, let's say it was on this gray background. It knows that it was on a gray background. Right? And let's say it was really bulbous in this area here. It will recreate a bulbousness. Right? But it's not exactly the same object, is it? And that's because it never found it. So the only thing that the OREF is communicating is the depth map, which is, loosely speaking, sort of the structure. It can't tell it what the thing is. It can't tell it what the thing is. Does that make sense, Mary Smith? Why OREF doesn't quite play? Because it's not found. This is also why image prompting doesn't quite work. If Midjourney doesn't know what it is, it doesn't know what it is even when you show it a picture. It's like, a picture of something that I don't know what it is. Thank you for this picture of a thing that I don't know what it is. Spirit Power, we're talking about how image prompts and OREFs don't really teach Midjourney what a thing is. This, do you see this thing? This is something Midjourney doesn't know what it is. It's an Alexa switch. If I say Midjourney, I have an Alexa switch, and I use the word Alexa switch, and I show it this picture. Midjourney goes and says, you've shown me an Alexa switch. It goes into its mind. It finds a desert, an embedding desert, a scarcity of information about Alexa switches. And so it's just like, well, okay, it's rectangular and white and has, I don't know, some lines on it and some gold stuff in the back. And it's three-dimensional and smooth. And so that's what the OREF communicates. It's in relationship to the surface it's sitting on. It looks like it's, you know, this big in proportion to the thing. It can never figure out what it is. Right. That's why, Mary Smith. Promptogram says, is there anything you can do if your prompt is not in the training data set? Not even in profile or mood board. Right. No. How do you get deliberately and intentionally a helicopter alligator? Promptogram. It knows alligator, and it knows helicopter, and it knows magical fantasy hybrid chimera. So you should be able to get it to blend. Magical hybrid chimera alligator helicopter monster. There you go. I mean, I don't know what you had in mind, but that's pretty much an alligator helicopter. I would definitely run if I saw that coming. Does that help, Promptogram? Do you see the words I used? Magical, hybrid, chimera, monster. These words give Midjourney permission to blend and blur things and do things crazy. Because when it goes in, when the bees go out for magical, hybrid, and chimera, they find things like that. No, Midjourney didn't learn from that prompt. It's not capable of it. If I do alligator helicopter now and it works, it's because alligator helicopter would always work. It would always work. If I did alligator, and the helicopter, that might be enough noise between the two tokens that it doesn't blend them anymore. They're empty tokens, so I don't know. Oh, there we go. Separated them. Yeah, this is blending and entanglement. Exactly, Mary Smith. And then I stopped the blending and entanglement by adding benign noise between the two tokens. Do you see what I mean by, like, there's no right way to prompt, but if you start to learn how Midjourney works, you can do all sorts of crazy things to manipulate it in your prompting? That's why in this class, the beginner's class is about starting to realize how Midjourney works, which, first of all, debunks every myth right away. Like, because people come in sometimes, most of you are veterans, but some of the new people who come in are like, well, I heard that I should use the seed to control the face of my character or whatever. But actually learning how Midjourney works puts that all to rest and helps you realize that it's not what's the right way to write this prompt, but how can I use the prompt to steer? The prompt is your finest tool. Okay, well, we are smack dab out of time, you guys. So what I would like to do at this point is let you know that although our class is over, you are not, your support is not over. You get 24/7 support from the Promptcraft community with your membership. There's a web-based Promptcraft support room. There's a Discord-based Promptcraft support room. You just hop in there. Oh, wait, we have a question from YouTube. So it's not possible to pick one item in the batch and edit that one item further through prompt improvements. Yes, Seppi, I don't know if you're still here. I know you asked this question a million years ago. This is what Seppi asked. Put it in here. So it's not possible to pick one item in the batch and edit that one further through prompt improvements. You can. That's called variations. So, for example, there's also remix and some other things you can do. Like, for example, let's say I want this helicopter to be black instead of red. What I can do is a subtle remix and say that the helicopter and the black obsidian helicopter, right? And what it'll do is use the structure of my picture and try to paint the new prompt on top of it. It's called scaffolding. So you see how it basically kept, it didn't perfectly keep it because that's not how Remix works, but it essentially kept it, and it made the helicopter black. It also put a blackbird on the alligator's nose. So it is possible to pick one item in the batch and then use Remix. Remix is a gradual change using the scaffolding of the existing image. A gradual change using the scaffolding of the original image, or it could be you can do a strong remix, and that will create new compositions, brand new compositions. It's not a gradual change using the same image. It's almost a brand new image using a semantic understanding of the existing image. Notice it didn't change it to a black helicopter. I wonder if I have to say obsidian black. Whoop. So that's giving it two things that are black, right? It puts more attention on the blackness of the helicopter. Well, I got my black helicopter, but I didn't say the. So it started blending again. But yeah, that's the difference. One creates a new composition and one creates this change based on the scaffolding of the other image. Oh, Seppi was still here, so Seppi might have actually gotten that answer. Do you have any follow-up questions, Seppi? Or Swing, or Signature? Or Secret Chat? Or Chrono? Ryder? Gravenbach? Misty Ravine? Sarah? Okay. Thank you. No more questions, says Seppi. Excellent. Okay, well, no more questions. Great. Well, you know what I have to say? I have to say congratulations for graduating Midjourney's class. You've made it. You've officially graduated from prompting for beginners. I think that means two things, you guys. One, you now know more than 90% of Midjourney users, 99% of Midjourney users. And two, now you are cursed to see every single chaotic token in every prompt on Reddit or in Explore or whatever. You're gonna look at prompts and you're gonna go like, oh, that could use some improvement. Thank you. You survived. You graduated again. Extra hats to throw in the air. Okay, so I'm going to leave you with the Luma calendar. And I'm going to leave you with the feedback. Now, here's the deal. This feedback form will give you digital goodies from Midjourney. I say that every time. I've been saying it for a long time. I promise that it's true because I've actually talked to someone and we are actually getting it set up. So please consider leaving your email and email address. It doesn't have to be the email address. There is no spam or any risk of that. It's Midjourney. There's no spam. It doesn't. I'm the only one who will control this particular list. And what I'll do is I'll use it to send you digital goodies. So if you haven't filled out the feedback form before, please do so. Fill it out again if you've already filled it out before. Help yourself to our other events. All kinds of things happening here today. Please don't miss prompt battles. Saturday edition of prompt battles. We'll begin in a couple hours. There it is. Prompt battles. All right. Thanks, everyone. We are adjourned. Please do fill out that form, the tally form. Leave your honest feedback. Thank you, everyone out there in YouTube and Twitch and all the other places. Thanks for putting up with the camera problems. Woohoo! Awkward dance. Awkward dance. Do it with me. Awkward dance. I'll do it alone. Awkward dance.